Hey guys. Oops. Sorry, been drinking a lot. Anyways, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed part 1. In there we talked about the story, characters, the levels, and several aspects of the gameplay. And here in part 2 we will talk about more features of the gameplay, the special stages, the enemies, and the bosses. Sometimes in the levels there might be some special stages, like a section where you have to run away from lava Crash Bandicoot style, or a motorcycle minigame section that's very fun, because it is very fast paced. There's a lot of obstacles to avoid by jumping or dodging. By the way, you can still use witch time here, so make sure to use it a lot. Also, this section is so over the top, absurd and ridiculous that I love it. It fits perfectly with the tone of the game. Though I think that the first one lasts a bit longer than it should have. It kind of overstays this welcome. Also, there is a level that has a stage minigame that's a reference to a space harrier, where you are flying on top of a missile, which could have been neat, except that it was miserable. The controls were really bad, the camera moves too much. Every time that you do a dodge to avoid attacks, the missile will do a 360 spin and so does the camera, which is very disorienting. Also, it was too long, and it was somehow more clunky than the original Space Harrier. And I know that because I have that game. But the trick to beat it is not to avoid the attacks by just moving out of the way, but by using the dodge to activate witch time. So abuse it as much as you can. Though it doesn't work with all attacks, so make sure to use dodges in the ones that it does work, like the fireballs. Luckily, that was the only level in the entire game that was downright bad. I also like that you can only buy a limited amount of recovery items in the store. It really incentivizes you to use your halos on buying new techniques or abilities, instead of just expending them all in recovery items that will make the boss battles too easy. So, even if you are having too much trouble with them and you don't care for the rating, you can still get ingredients by exploring the levels to mix them up and create more recovery items. Or a few power-ups that can increase the amount of damage that you can deal, or ones that can make you invulnerable for a few seconds. Now let's go with antagonists. The main bad guys are the angels. The developers probably choose them to be the main enemies of the game so they could look different from the demons in Devil May Cry. And at first it seems they are exactly that. Just excuse to have a different look. But they do have their own unique style. It might be a bit overly designed for my taste, with all the details in the super bright golden parts. But I still think they do have a neat aesthetic. They are very clumsy and constantly get humiliated by Bayonetta, and they are just basically pure evil monsters. They are very fun and silly villains. I just wish that they based these angels in some kind of mythology, and as far as I know, they're not. But luckily, gameplay-wise, they come in a lot of varied forms and sizes. which makes them functional and entertaining enemies to fight against. The larger enemies with a health bar usually have the most variety of attacks and thus tend to be very unique to that enemy type. So you will have to remember the attacks of each enemy type so they don't surprise you. The larger enemies also tend to be quite difficult to defeat. Some of them will even qualify as sub-bosses. But they also have the best weapons that you can grab from them, which can be very useful in future battles. Now let's talk about the bosses. Remember the savior from Devil May Cry 4 and how awesome this boss fight was? Mostly because how impressive it was at the time and how different he was from every other boss in the game? Would you like if every boss in this game was like that? Yeah, I'm not kidding! Every boss with the exception of the Jin battles and the Balder boss fight tries so hard to be as epic at the end of the world as possible, where the boss is as huge as a building, so much that any of them could be a final boss in another game. And I have to say that after a while it gets a bit tiresome. The most fun that you will have with the bosses in this kind of games is when there's a lot of bosses with a lot of variety in shapes and sizes, to challenge you in many ways. And that's not possible where every boss is a super gigantic monster. Not to mention that they are filled with quick time events interruptions that ruin the flow of the fight, and while they're definitely cool the first time, they get repetitive, boring, and feel like a waste of time where you're replaying the boss for a better rating. Not only that, but these bosses are not as well made as an endgame boss from other games, because it is a lot easier to have the time to make them as good as possible when you only have to do one in each game. I get it that this was a whole new era of gaming with the new consoles, so they probably wanted to create as much spectacle as possible. But these kind of bosses take time to make. So because these bosses are so big and epic, there's not many of them. Which guess what that means? They reuse and recycle bosses constantly. Not as much as the first Devil May Cry did, but far more than the Devil May Cry 4. Granted, unlike the Devil May Cry games where they sometimes repeat them in a boss rush, in this game the bosses never work quite the same as they did in the original battle. There is always some things that makes them different, though sometimes I wish they did the lazier approach of the boss rush, because one boss that's reused in the final level, now you have to defeat him in a terrible turret section. These bosses are also very poorly made in terms of difficulty. The first one it is very hard, which makes you think you have a great challenge ahead. But most of the next bosses progressively get easier each time, which is very disappointing, since you obviously expect the bosses to scale up in their challenge. The first four are the cardinal virtues. These are the super epic gigantic Godzilla monster boss battles that I mentioned before. Most of these are okay, but they are far more focused on doing a spectacle over using the main core fighting gameplay mechanics to the fullest. Though, because they do have some platforming elements, you do get to use the panther and crow transformation a lot compared to other bosses or sub-bosses. These bosses also have very predictable and simple patterns, without too much variety of attacks for most of their phases, and they also last for a long time. Now let's talk about the main bosses individually. Fortitudo. Like I just mentioned, this guy is quite challenging for a first boss. You start the fight over a bridge, and it is better to not fall from it since his attacks are easier to avoid from there. Not to mention he can fill the floor below the bridge with lava. But be careful, he can destroy the bridge. Though luckily you can rebuild it again by using a giant magic hourglass. Lucky for you, he is quite slow, so you will have to avoid its bite attack to activate Witch Time, and then attack one of his dragon heads. Eventually he will be staggered and open for a quick time event finisher. After doing this a few times, he will fill the floor with lava, and then you will have to jump in some flotating platforms in a limited amount of time. Though for this part you can do a long automatic jump by just pressing X and get in the platforms faster. Once you reach him, you will do another quick time event finisher that will deal a lot of damage and cut one of his dragon heads. Do this with both and you will trigger its last phase. Beat that one and he will be done after doing another satisfying over the top finisher. Pretty good fight for the starting boss, giving a high bar standard for the next bosses. Temperatia. This boss is easier than the last one, but is still quite challenging. At first, he will mostly shoot you fire bullets while holding the platform where Bayonetta is in, so you will have to avoid those bullets while also attacking his fingers. Also, just like for Tuto, you can still use the long automatic jumps to move into other platforms, since he sometimes destroys them. Though you can still move into them by flying using the crow transformation. Then after doing that, you will have to jump into his arm and hit his weak points while he uses a lot of different types of attacks. Then you will rip his arm off. Do the same with the other one and the rest of the battle is similar, only that now you walk all over his body searching for his weak points. Then you will attack his head and defeat him. Very straightforward yet still a very fun boss. Justitia. This battle is also very straightforward. Just attack the tentacle with the baby face while avoiding the multiple attacks that the other plant tentacles will throw at you. But most of them just want to reach you if you stay away from the center of the platform. Just like with the last one, this also has flotating platforms. But the difference is that if you fall into the pit, instead of reappearing back into the platform and losing some health, here one of the plant tentacles will attack you. You will have to do a quick time event to evade it and jump back into the platforms. But if you fail, you will get eaten and that's an insta-kill. After beating the babyface for a while, it will get dazed. Then you will have to jump over it, run on its long tentacle while avoiding a few obstacles, until you reach one of the three main phases. Then you will attack the base of the tentacle until you cut it. Do this 3 times and you will beat the boss. This one is not as good as the last one, but it's still a pretty fun fight overall. Sapienta. This is the gimmicky boss of the game. For this battle, Bayonetta will be surfing on a piece of metal while Sapienta constantly attacks her by diving into the water and leaping out of it. He also shoots a lot of rockets. The surfing controls are okay and you can damage the boss by attacking the faces in his legs. Then you will attack his main head and then you will go into the second phase. For this one he will create a sea vortex and you will have to reach him while he constantly tries to pull you back by shooting lasers and more rockets. Defeat him here and he's done. Just another pretty okay boss fight. John. She's the main rival of the game, and sadly I think she's not a very compelling character. She basically has a very similar personality to Bayonetta, but less fun and charming. It is also hard to enjoy her since she doesn't have that much screen time and most of it is her just fighting Bayonetta. Gameplay wise she's not that great either. She just has the same moves as Bayonetta in most of her fights, but occasionally she might bring a motorcycle to attack you with it. I think they took the saying of the best bosses in hack and slash games are the ones that are roughly on equal footing with the player and have a similar set of skills, a little too literal. The reason why those bosses are fun it is because they feel like another player using a different character in a fighting game. They have a similar set of skills to you, which is why they can put those skills to the test so well, but while also having a few abilities unique to them, so they can still catch you off guard with those, which is why Virgil works so well as a rival in Devil May Cry 3, and same goes for Jetstream Sam in Metal Gear Rising. John, on the other hand, just has the exact same set of skills as Bayonetta, so it is not just lazy, but pretty boring, since that makes her a predictable opponent, and she is also pretty annoying because she can randomly use a parry to stop your combos then off tracks, and you can't do anything about it. Also prepare to hear a lot of "Arrgh!" But at least her last battle it is quite challenging and fun. Not an instant classic, but still entertaining. Mostly because they really upped the spectacle for this one. They jumping from missiles into a skyscraper, or throwing giant missiles at each other like it is a tennis match. Also in this battle she will keep changing between her weapons and using different abilities to keep you on your toes, so you will have to pay a lot of attention to her attacks. Not to mention that you can't activate Witch Time with most of her attacks, but you can when she uses her Wicked Whips. But be careful, since if you mess it up, you will get a lot of damage. So the battle is quite fast-paced, with lots of dodges, counter-attacks, and constantly trying to trigger Witch Time to deal the most amount of damage to her. Though there's one aspect that really annoys me about her battles. It is that in a few parts you will have to be forced to do a quick time event finisher, just like with most bosses, but the difference is that in the struggle by Bayonetta and John punching each other using their wicked whips, and if you don't feel most of the gouge, it will count as John winning that struggle and you will lose some health. Every other time that you did this type of finisher quick time event with torture attacks and the boss finisher filling up the gouge was optional, and you would only get rewarded with more score for filling it up more. But in here you get punished for failing. Not only the game doesn't tell you this so you don't expect it, but also the amount of button tapping that you will have to do to fill up the gouge enough to win the struggle is way too much. Sure, if you do it right, you will deal a lot of damage to John, but since in her last battle she spams you this move, your fingers will get tired and most of the time you will get hit. Balder. He was honestly a pretty boring villain in the story. Aside from having a pretty cool design, he has not much to offer. He gets very little screen time and nothing about his personality leaves an impression on me. He is just a very generic bad guy that acts like a bad anime villain. Most of his dialogue is cryptic exposition as supposedly everything goes according to his plan, yet he gets defeated in the end in a dumb way. The best example of this is in his own boss fight where he seemed to be the only guy that was a match for Bayonetta and even put her in big troubles. But then he just got defeated by a lipstick. However, besides that embarrassing anticlimactic ending, the battle itself is freaking amazing and entertaining. He's not a gigantic opponent like the Cardinal Virtus, he's even faster than John, and he even has a moveset of his own, like a lot of slashes attacks with a very long energy blade, and multiple long range attacks like fireballs and giant lasers. Also, since he has a nice variety of attacks, you will have to be prepared for anything that he might throw at you. And since he's constantly attacking you, you will have to keep evading his attacks. He will not give you time to do long combos on him. When you first start the battle, you will be overconfident, yet slightly confused because you see he only has one life bar. But when you drain all his health and you use your finisher, this happens. Because of this, the battle is quite intense, since he keeps defeating your demon summons when you try to use your finisher. Speaking about that, the spectacle for this battle is even more insane than with the John battle. I mean, this dude is crazy. He even shoots you a giant laser with a satellite. And when that doesn't work, he just lets the entire satellite fall into you. Another aspect that makes this battle so challenging is that you can't activate Witch Time with most of his attacks. So because of that, here is when that accessory that allows you to activate Witch Time when you get hit in exchange of some magic will become incredibly useful. So don't forget to buy it in the shop. This is probably the best boss in the entire game, at least gameplay wise. You do get to use the fighting mechanics to its full potential, which more bosses in the game did. Also, his battle theme is absolutely fantastic and beautiful, probably the best track in the entire game. Well, that was an awesome boss battle. Time to watch the credits and relax. But wait! Balder is still alive? Dun dun dun! Yeah, no shit, Bayonetta. Of course he's not dead. Or did you really think that your lipstick was enough to kill him? Before the next and final boss, John has to save Bayonetta before a really bad thing happens. Something about the eyes of the world and to revert the universe. Whatever that means. Oh yeah, and John is one of the good guys now. But anyways, to save Bayonetta you must place as John in another motorcycle minigame section, and this one is very fun as well. But you will have to avoid tons of attacks from several enemies. As always, make sure to use Witch Time a lot. And as you probably have noticed, this stage is even more over the top than the last one. So much that it makes all the previous feats done by Bayonetta seem normal by comparison. But now comes the climax of the game, and things are only going to get more insane from here. Jubileus. She is the final boss of the game. She was a fucking joke. The camera on this battle was horrible, but it still was incredibly easy and barely a challenge. Her attacks are very telegraphed and easy to avoid. You might only die a couple of times because of her "fuck you, I have a surprise insta-kill" attack that she pulls over her ass. But once you learn to anticipate that attack, she is an absolute cakewalk. I remember a lot of people at the time were saying that she was the greatest final boss ever made, and Look, she can throw black holes and galaxies at you. And yeah, I bet that the spectacle must have been really impressive at the time, but those kind of things age really badly if there's no good gameplay behind it. Also, some parts of the battle are awful. Like in the ice section, she can stun lock you by freezing you and then squashing you with some ice balls. The thunderstorm section is also bad, since like with some of the previous bosses you have to jump in some platforms using the long automatic jumps. But the difference here is that the platforms are moving around, and the jump won't work if the platform is too far away, even though the bottom prompt still appears, and it is hard to tell how long the jump is and when you have to jump. It doesn't help that there's thunders and enemies constantly attacking you. But you're probably wondering, why not use the crow transformation instead? And you will be right, that will be a good solution. Except that for this section there's invisible walls. You are forced to use the bottom prompted automatic jumps. Not only that, but the proportion of this battle are completely wrong. In the gameplay she's smaller than an average sized building, yet I'm supposed to think that in the cutscenes she is sometimes bigger than planets? And after Bayonetta's new gigantic summon punches Jubileos so hard that her spirit comes off and falls into the sun, then her corpse also gets launched, but way later for some reason, and is so big that her remainings are going to fall into Earth and destroy it? This makes absolute no sense. This was way too much stupid for me. Even for a game like this it was too much. They truly jumped the shark in this ending. I guess I should say something positive about the freaking final boss of the game. Oh, at least Jubileos does have a great battle team. I can see how that could convince someone that the battle was actually good and not pure trash. Okay, let's see. I am forgetting anything? Oh yeah, there's also a post-game boss. And it is Rodan. Damn, that guy was so cool. I can't wait to fight him. What I need to do to unlock that fight? What? 10 million halos? Oh no, fuck this, I am not doing that. But at least from what I have seen, he seems to be a very entertaining and challenging boss. At first he might seem like a recycle of the Baldur boss fight, and it even uses its same team, but he does have plenty of moves of his own, and it seems that he is the hardest boss in the entire game. So I am glad that I decided to give one last challenge for the completionists. Well, let's finish this up. Here's my conclusion. Overall, I enjoyed Bayonetta a lot, despite its many flaws. Because the main gameplay it is just that good and fun. There's a huge moveset at your disposal. The weapons could be better, but they work very well. The level design it is pretty good. There's a lot of enemies and sub-bosses variety. The bosses are a mixed bag, since some of them are very good and some others are disappointing or just bad. But many of those problems got fixed in the sequel, so I can't wait to play it again. I give this game a 7 out of 10. Okay, that's the end of this Bayonetta review. The sequels will be covered eventually on this channel, but first I will do other game franchises before those. Don't forget to share and like if you enjoyed the video. And if you want to see more stuff from me, then please consider subscribing to this channel. See you later, guys!